All right, we got some amazing feedback on Dan's video post from last week on should you be eating carbs. Now I managed to nab Dan. We've just finished a training session, so sorry we might be looking a little bit shaggy, or I might be. I wanted to do a version 2 and go a little bit deeper on should you be eating carbs. So firstly, I wanted to ask Dan, why did you choose carbs to talk about in last week's video blog?
So I reckon carbs at the moment is probably the thing that's been hit up in the media the most. Protein and fats are important, don't get me wrong, but I think this is kind of where a lot of the information is going out, and I think a lot of it is actually misrepresented, so hopefully we'll clear a few things up with that.
Cool. So last week you presented us with this matrix, which gave some really good insight. I just wanted to go a little bit deeper on the matrix and ask a few questions about it. Can you just explain it to us again, just quickly?
Yep. So basically the principle is here, we've got our body fat. So the higher body fat you are, further up the chain you're going to be. And we couple that with our training intensity. So for the guys and girls who are looking to lose a few kilos, typically the body fat's going to be up here. Usually the training will be quite low as well. As you start to train more, as you start to get more intense, as you start to get leaner, we move down in towards this spectrum. Takes a little bit of time, but we get there.
Yeah, cool. So let's, the thing that I like to do is, like to think, where do I sit on the matrix? So let's just give the viewers just a little bit of insight so they can work out where they're sitting. So let's talk about the person who wants to lose, 5 to 10 kilos. They might not be training at all or just a little bit. Where would they sit on the matrix?
Yep. So the average person, so we use the number roughly 15% body fat for males, a little bit higher for females. Typically the people who are going to want to be losing weight are going to be higher than that. And the likelihood is also that they're not training very much or possibly not at all yet, which means we're going to be right down this end and up here in terms of the body fat percentage. So we're going to be quite low carbs to start with. As we get leaner, as we get fitter, we can start to handle a bit more.
So want to lose 5, 10 kilos, training little to not at all.
Yep. We're
talking lower carbs throughout the day.
Yes.
And so we'll talk about how much that is in a minute. Let's talk about the person who, and let's talk about the other end of the spectrum. So somebody who's already lean, and they're training maybe 5 times a week, quite high intensity. What sort of carbs, intake do they need?
Yep. So we're going to presume that, we've got a female here who's quite lean. She's 14% body fat. She's training 5 times a week, as Daz said. We're going to be somewhere in this high carbohydrate realm, somewhere along here, which means she can handle the carbs very well. We need to get carbs in at each meal. We can be somewhere in the order of 200 to 300 grams a day for that person, which is quite a lot. If you've ever tried to eat it, it's actually hard work. But they're going to be way down this end, they're going to earn their carbs, and we've got to get them in quite regularly to support what they do.
So Dan, just high level, we're looking at, the sort of either end of the spectrum here on this chart. Why does somebody who wants to lose weight, isn't training very much, why can they not have many carbs? Or why does their body not need many carbs compared to the person who's lean and training a lot?
Yep.
They need lots of carbs.
So carbohydrates obviously a primary fuel for training. So the more you train, the more you need to fuel the body. Typically the person who isn't doing much training is not as sensitive to carbs as well. So trying to get blood sugars down, trying to get the sugar into the muscle, typically requires exercise to do it, or insulin, which I'm sure you've all heard of. The lower end of the carbs means you need less insulin and you need less exercise to absorb the same amount of sugar.
So we're really talking here the relationship of body composition.
Yes.
The effect of exercise.
Yep.
Yeah. And the insulin sensitivity.
Yes.
So how it makes us look, which is how it makes us feel, and how it makes us perform, the energy that it gives us, those things all really important to us, and that's why this matrix is important, and why we would follow these principles, so that we look good, so that we feel good, so that we perform well, and we have lots of energy. Yeah, cool. So let's talk just again about this person that sits up here, wants to lose 5-10 kilos, doesn't train very much. How many carbs in a day should that person be having?
It is different for everyone, but you're going to be looking more towards the 30 to 50 gram mark, somewhere around there. Primarily for these people, you're looking at things like green vegetables, different variation, different colors on your plate. And also when you go into sort of fruits, the berries tend to work really well, and some of the citrus tends to work really well for these guys. Low sugar, high taste, good fiber, fills you up.
So 30 to 50 grams, did you say? So like to give people an idea of how much that might be?
It's about 5 kilos of broccoli. Green vegetables you can literally eat almost to your heart's content. They're very, very low in calories, very low in carbs, but very high in nutrients. Fruit, I would say 1 to 2 pieces a day from those categories, so you can't go too hard on fruits. Sweet potato a little bit less, and potatoes a little bit less, but you can still have a little bit of those as well. Staying away from things like the high carbohydrate things, rice, breads, pastas, all the good going out food,
Cool. And the biggest mistakes these people make?
Going out is definitely one. It's very, very hard to eat well when you start going to Italian restaurants and things like that. Even breakfast, when you get a couple of slices of toast, it's not the end of the world, but it is going to start to push us into that moderate carb zone. Second thing I commonly see is that people don't consider alcohol. Alcohol's a big one. It's easy to drink. Some people drink a lot of it. It adds up carbs very, very quickly.
So your recommendation for these people to, drop that 5 to 10 kilos?
Primarily greens. I try to get them at each meal. For some sweetness, I would go towards berries. Having them with breakfast is great, or a little bit of a snack with some almonds or some other nuts. And staying away from the more processed, so the harder grains, things like that.
Cool. So we'll spin down to the other end of the spectrum. So here's our person who's leaner. They're under that 15%. They don't want to necessarily lose any weight or lean up anymore. They're training multiple times a week. They might even have a physical job. Carbohydrate intake a day, and where should they get that from?
So as we said with these guys need to support what they do. They have a high output, they have a high workload. So we're looking at 200 to 300 grams a day. I have seen more in top level athletes, but we're talking about things like rice, pastas. I prefer gluten-free, but it's not essential. Some breads can come into there, bananas, mangoes, sweet potatoes, all these high density sources. We can even go into things like fruit juices. I use rice milk a lot in this area as well. Things that you can get the carbohydrates in, because it's not easy to eat. So you must get as much as you can.
Yeah, great. Dan, thanks so much for your time. I'm sure that you guys have got some more questions. Post it in the comments if you've got questions. Make sure Dan jumps in there and answers them. And if you need help with this sort of stuff, Dan and myself are available to work with you. So yeah, ping us a message.